because I don't have a photographic memory. Do we have a list of members at the bottom of the screen right here?
I don't think that.
Can you make note of who's in attendance?
I'll call Bill.
Perfect.
Matt Cruikshank,
Here.
John Scudder,
Here.
Steve Horn,
Here.
Diana Evans. Here. Mike Rayberg,
Here.
Mike Fenster. I don't think he's here. Bruce Bustamante. Debbie Rinke,
Here.
Bob French,
Here.
Jim Winchester, and S.J. Klein.
Here.
We have 8 members present.
Perfect. We have quorum. So move to approval of agenda. As short as sweet as this is, we have one action item, and this is the 2050 MTP performance measures and criteria. This is going to be our CAC comments. We had one individual that submitted, and they'll have the floor first to go over their comments. And then we'll open it up to if there's any comments that any member wants to bring forth right now. And based off of that, I'd like to, actually, we'll probably separate them out. We'll separate the comments that were submitted and then everyone else's comments into 2 different motions unless anybody objects and approve. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
This is SJ. I'll move to approve.
Can I get a second?
This is Steve Horn, second.
Okay, so we'll move to our 2050 MTP performance measures and criteria. So we had one set of comments that was submitted at the last moment, and that was by Mike.
Mike Rayberg.
So Mike, you have the floor. Do you want to go over your comments with us?
Hi. Yeah. So this is probably more clarification notes than comments. I'm new at this, so I hope I went about it the right way. I sent a PDF that I had marked up with a few notes about.
Yep, we're following along.
Okay. So whether these need to be incorporated in the committee comment or not, I guess we could go through one at a time if that works for you.
Well, let's just see, go through all of them and then we'll move to approve. If there's any objections with approving all of them, then we can break them up individually.
Okay, let's see. So 1B3, percentage of program projects that incorporate nature-based solutions. I was wondering if we could clarify, is that the percentage of all projects or just the projects that are in the seismic and flood zones, which seems to be the point.
Any staff comment?
I recommend you submit it as a comment for your.
Okay, next.
Okay. A couple of them had to do with quality of, I know that performance measure is a way to get a number on things to show that things were achieved. But for a couple of them, I was wondering if there's a way to incorporate a little bit more about the quality of what you're getting, I suppose. 2C1 and 2C2, they talk about how many what percentage of projects include non-motorized elements or include reduction in conflict between motorized and non-motorized. I suppose that's what that means. Is it enough to say that a project has incorporated the elements, or do we want to have some kind of a count, or, you know, how many elements were included? I'm not sure if that complicates this too much or not. You know, do we need to know how much a project includes, or just the fact that yes, indeed, the project included consideration and inclusion of these elements? Thought I'd get some thoughts.
3B.
3B4, I was just, the number of bus stops added seemed useful as a number, but we know that the bus routes have shrunk a bit, so it's not always going to guarantee service.
Could you expand on that a little more?
One of the measures to improve facilities to encourage transit use. I guess my question is, are we looking at just kind of the physical facilities here? Because, you know, the transportation projects can improve bus stops. They can move bus stops out of the traffic lanes. But when you add bus stops, but there's no bus routes in the area, I'm wondering if that's a useful thing to measure. Because we
Okay.
have a bunch of empty bus stops now in Muldoon anyways.
3D.
3D 2. I was wondering, how is the percent of employment measured? That seemed kind of like a strange. How do you measure the percent of employment? Like the percentage of businesses within a quarter mile?
I'm assuming it's probably businesses with the number of employees they have.
Okay.
So that was a
Alright.
question you had right there.
Yeah, submit that as a comment.
really
We
just
can
a
probably
question.
respond to it
Okay.
later, yeah.
Yeah, that was just a question. Okay. So it's easy to measure.
3H.
3H has the ones, that's kind of the ones that I was sort of most interested in. We talk about the percentage of road projects that have a buffer for snow storage to keep the snow off the non-motorized facilities alongside. It says the percent of projects. I wonder if it would make more sense to say what percentage of the road miles in that project or the path miles in that project have the snow buffer. So instead of saying, 80% of projects are the snow buffer, we could say, this project, 8 of 10 road miles or whatever do have the buffer and 2 of the 10 don't. Just to see that we're getting the amount of buffers that we're getting.
4B1.
Is that can we link tourism spending to the transportation projects? Is there a strong link to that in the literature or whatnot, or in practice?
That's what we're trying to do.
Okay.
That's a good comment. Yeah.
4B2.
Mostly just a comment or discussion item on the how complete the signage or wayfinding is when you're adding wayfinding to a project. Is it useful? Is it it may include it, but is it good quality? 4E1 is another one of the ones where I was thinking how do we want to measure how complete something is or what the quality is? Is it enough to say that a project includes complete streets elements, or do we want to have some kind of a measure of how much of a project is compliant with complete streets, like trying to measure the benefit instead that the project looked at complete streets, but can we also say, well, of the project mileage, we did 2 miles of Spinard Road and we 1.8 miles met complete street standards. I would suggest that might be an alternative way to measure that.
Just clarification, there are no complete street standards.
Okay.
They are.
Well, that's why that was in brackets.
Policies.
Okay. Well, if it's not something that can be measured, then there's no point in measuring it. So thanks. That really helps.
We can, it's just, I don't know how many projects we would do where we'd only do like 5% of it is a complete street and the rest we wouldn't. So I
Okay.
kind of understand what you mean, but that's something to noodle on for us. So it's a good comment. I'm interested how we can kind of meet the intent of what your question is asking about here, so.
Well, it sounds like from your answer, that is something that seems to be part of your intent. I guess that's the feeling that I'm getting from hearing you explain that. Like you either have it or you don't. Is that what you're saying when it comes to complete streets? You have
Pretty
a project,
much,
you're like, okay. Since I don't know the methodology, I defer to other people on the committee, but it sounds like a pretty good explanation to me.
So what I'm going to do
It's
next
there or it's
is
not.
we'll get a motion on the table to approve Mike's comments, and then we'll go into discussion. Oh, is there more?
One more.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Just
Mike.
one. I was for 5D1, I was a little bit confused. Why would we measure the percent of eligible projects that have NEPA review and permitting? if they all have to either have a finding of no impact or else have NEPA? Or am I totally off base there? Wouldn't it be 100%?
I mean, eventually, yes. But not everything will have gone through NEPA right away because you haven't. Yeah, it's a good question. We'll go ahead and answer it.
Oh, are you
So-
so is this relative to projects that are in the plan that may be done someday? And that
Yes,
NEPA will happen when it gets much closer to construction?
yes.
Oh, in that case, that answers my question. That's
But that's a good one there that we may have to provide some clarification of what we mean for that one. So I recommend you submit the comment. It's a good one.
Perfect.
Okay.
So now can we get a motion on the floor to, and just to clarify, we're gonna get a motion, a second, we'll have discussion if there's any questions about comments, and then we'll move to approve. So can I get a motion?
So this is SJ, just to be clear, we're just making a motion to approve Michael's comments. We're gonna do another motion for additional comments. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, great. I will make a motion to accept the comments that Michael has submit by the CAC.
Can I get a second?
Bob French, second.
Okay, now we're in discussion. Are there any specific questions about the comments made? Are there any objections to approving?
This
Mike's
is just
comment.
Mike again. I would strike the ones that are simply questions that were clarified. So
But actually, it's a
remove any of
good
that.
point is if you had those questions and clarification could be included on the dialogue right there, it's worthwhile to move
Okay.
forward so that future people, I think that you did a great job.
Yeah, I
Okay.
agree. Please keep them in. They're very helpful for us as the project team to provide that information in response to people.
Are there any objections to approving? Hearing none, the motion's approved. And I just want to say, Mike, you did a great job. I know it was last minute, but nobody else submitted comments. We want to say, you're going to be leading by example right now. Okay, with that.
I'm new
we'll
at this, so I'm new at this, so don't be too impressed.
We'll give you a couple months and see.
I haven't gotten comfortable yet.
Okay, so now we're open to the floor and I can't see the Teams meeting. Do we have comments now?
This is SJ. I will admit that I haven't put a bunch of time into the MTP performance measures until just before the meeting. But yeah, I mean, I do definitely have a couple of items that I wouldn't mind bringing forward. Just reflecting kind of stuff that we brought up in the comment that we made to the Seward Glen Highway project.
So unless someone objects, I thought about what I had originally said, and I don't think it's feasible because we don't have comments in front of us. As you're bringing up these comments, we should probably choose to approve the comments as we go. Staff's opinion, I think we don't have something written on that we could look at all at once. So I think we just need to go one at a time and approve. Are there any objections to doing that format?
I think that's a good idea. I
Yep.
agree.
Okay,
I'm okay with that. And I'll just put them forward one at a time. I've only got two so far, but one at a time as just as motions. So my first motion would be to make a comment for section 2A and 2C, which sorry, let me go back through my notes, which are goals to improve safety and security. I would make a comment that for 2A and 2C, that we would like to see performance measures that reflect designs taking into account existing use patterns by non-motorized users of facilities in and around facilities. Does that make sense? So basically what 2A and 2C both deal with is pedestrian and other safety around facilities that are covered under the MTP. There's a lot of stuff related to total number of fatalities and to reducing the number of incidents that occur. But kind of what I'm interested in seeing is a performance measure that takes into account the existing use patterns in the upfront stage in the design, so that we're basically suggesting that you work with what we've got there in order to achieve the performance standards that they're seeking to achieve. Does that make sense?
Would we be giving up, if we're prioritizing non-motorized, would we be giving up emphasis on motorized?
I don't believe so. I mean, both of them are talking about the total number of like 2C is really about conflicts between motorized and non-motorized or different modes, and then 2A is just reducing the number of severity of all the different modes colliding with each other. 2A is reducing the severity of vehicle, pedestrian, bicycle, and motorcycle, and commercial vehicle crashes. So I don't think it's. I think and I don't really care that I'm fine not saying non-motorized in this, but existing use patterns of motorized and non-motorized use, I think it'd be, yeah. All right, so I'll rephrase this real quick then. The motion that I'm making then would be to add comment for 2A and 2C, that the performance measure be added that that design considerations should account for and fit existing use patterns between motorized and non-motorized usage.
And just to clarify this, I think we get lost in someone making a motion and seconding it. We'll just make one motion at the end to approve all of our approvals and denials right there all at one time. So we'll just vote on every single one of these as we go through. So I apologize.
So that's all right. Correct? So I've made a motion. Yeah, that's the motion. Yeah, all that needs to happen now is a second, and then we can discuss and approve or not.
You're right, because I guess we need to go in discussion of it. Yeah. Okay. So you made the motion. Can we get a second? You're right. Yeah.
Second.
Okay. Discussion.
This is Bob French.
Wait a
I'm not
second.
quite sure what is meant by, design considerations for existing use patterns. Are you trying to tie it together with, how many fatalities have been at a certain intersection or something in the past, and whether or not the number of fatalities hopefully goes down? Or I guess I'm not real clear on just really what that means.
Would you like to speak to can you answer that, Mike? Or I'm sorry, SJ?
I'd be happy to. Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, I guess what I'm looking at is really the experience in the Ingra-Gamble corridor. If you look at fatalities and response to fatalities, it's, typically FWHA's kind of protocols is to look at intersections and fatalities or crashes per intersection. Like what we're dealing with on Gamble Street, for example, the death that happened just like a week and a half ago was, it's really an endemic thing to the use of Gamble Street as a pedestrian corridor, on a sidewalk that doesn't exist with, that's also used for snow removal and light poles. So, I guess what I'm getting at is if you're trying to reduce fatalities at the intersection of Gamble Street and 13th, you can put in a crosswalk and a light, or you can say, is there, what's the existing use pattern that's causing these fatalities, and how does this design address that use pattern? And I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that I believe that just focusing on the number of accidents per intersection isn't necessarily gonna result in a systemic solution in design phase.
Are there any more questions?
I would maybe like, if Aaron would feel appropriate to comment. It seems like the performance measures are overall system-wide things that are usually measured. And it seems like what some of Mike's and SJ's are going toward is, on a specific project, I want something to happen. And it seems like that's more in the prioritization criteria where you look at a project, see what's proposed, and then look at the performance measures that you have. I mean, am I off base, or is that kind of more the way these two documents work
Yeah.
together?
Do you want me to comment on this recommendation directly or just in general?
Like, I had that trouble while I was looking, so it applies to his comment, but I think it's an overall thing we need to understand.
Okay, let me do.
I'd like
his comment.
specific comments. Yeah.
I'll do his comment first and then see if I can get some clarification on what you're asking. So one thing, looking at this, this performance measure, it doesn't, I'm not sure exactly what it'll do because it'll be 100%. All projects look at the data available, if it's available, and use it to help with design, anything like that. I don't know of a single project that's been constructed within the last 10 years that didn't look at the data if it was available. So I'm not sure what we're getting at with that. And second of all, I'm a little bothered by the fact that it says fit existing use patterns. This is a plan that's looking 20 years out. It shouldn't be looking at just existing use patterns, but also what future patterns should look like. So you're limiting yourself to say, okay, this is how people function today. That's how we're going to build it to address today. Well, what about 20 years from now? When you want to induce additional non-motorized users in the area, you need to take into account the future designs as well, or future way that you want to see the transportation system. So, just think about that when you're putting this in here. I think I understand what SJ is talking about here, but I don't know of a single project that hasn't looked at the data if it was available. And please
I
note,
really appreciate that, Aaron.
some of this data is not always available in an easy to use format. So we're working on that. Now, sorry, Diana, can you explain what you were asking about?
Well, so these items in the performance measures are generally data that you have available, right? I mean, that's why they're performance measures. You don't add performance measures that you don't have. And if you're talking about it, and it's like system-wide, like fatality rate per 100 million vehicles miles traveled, that's not a project-specific thing. So it seems like most of these are geared more toward system-wide data and SJ was, and some of the other things that Mike had, it seems like it was more of project-specific comments that are more, it seems like that's more in the criteria where you're ranking a project, not trying to see what your system is achieving.
Well, it's kind of both. So first, I will say, yes, we may have performance measures in here. I do know we have performance measures in here that we don't have data for. And that's okay, because we may not have the data yet, but it's recognized that we want to move towards getting that. And so we'll say, okay, we don't have the data yet, so we're not going to set a target for it, but we have it in here, something to work towards, because we know it's an important thing for our system. Because what I don't really want to do is just say, oh, we don't have the data, let's just ignore it and move on. Because I don't think that's how we should be looking at this plan, because this plan is also looking at the future as well. So we're analyzing that as part of this process.
But in general, that's kind of the.
In general. So when you see the white measures versus the blue, the white measures are the federal ones. So those ones we're not able to change. They are what they are. Those ones you can see are really system-wide. But the ones that we have in blue, we're trying to be a little more targeted in our approach, because those are municipal, or those are our local, AMAT specific ones.
Yeah.
So they can kind of do a region-wide and also project. But based on the comments that have been submitted, we'll have to look at, okay, is this appropriate as a performance measure, or is this appropriate as criteria?
Yeah, that's kind of,
And so
they were kind of blurred.
They do work together in that regard. I think a lot of the comments that Mike submitted were very good in terms of, okay, I need to understand more of what you're trying to get at here. And then that's where we're like, okay, is this really what we want here? Do we need something more in the criteria?
Do we have any comments, questions more for SJ?
This is Bob
Specifically-
French. I think one of the things that is, I see a performance measure as something that's taking the look backwards after a project is completed to see whether or not it really did what we hoped that it would do. And I see that as being fairly linked to, but also separate from the criteria that for ranking a project. Maybe Aaron could comment on that a little bit.
That was a question.
It can do both. I mean, yeah, the performance measures really are there to assess how we're doing. But they can also help guide where we want to go. And that's why we put the performance measures and criteria out, because they're kind of linked together. The performance measures do both.
What's the purpose of the performance measures? Why would you just use criteria? I mean, isn't the sole goal this really is to rank projects, right?
The criteria is to rank projects to make sure that they're helping to meet your goals and objectives. But the performance measures are there to assess how you are doing in meeting your goals and objectives. Because if you don't have performance measures, you can just say, oh yeah, we're doing all these projects, but then somebody's like, well, wait, how are we actually implementing, or how are we doing implementing this particular goal and objective? That's why we showed the goals and objectives and then all the performance measures, because it's like, that's what we're using to measure how we're doing towards achieving that goal and or objective. And that's why it's so weird, or that's why I know it's hard to understand, but that's why performance measures are an assessment of how we've done, but also a way to help us guide forward in where we want to go. And that's what we use our criteria for.
So they can go, actually, no, we need to stay on the motion at hand right here. We can go down a rabbit hole with this. So do we have any more comments, questions with SJ's resolution? Hearing none, are there any objections to approving SJ's comments? Hearing none, the comments are approved.
All right, Mr. Chair, thank you. I've got a second comment for section 4. If I threw it in the chat just for people, so people could actually read.
That would be fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah. So here's the section 4 comment that I thought we should consider. I would say support and improve land use and tax base on properties affected by the projects. I was just thinking about kind of solid objectives that that a transportation project can have an impact on, in an area affected by a transportation project. And I think, kind of a solid measuring stick would be tax base and land use improvements. And does the project, support, either the land use or increasing the tax base?
So he put in his chat, he put his specific comment. Can we see his specific comment? Oh, you can't just.
If you click on that, little conversation bubble, it should show up.
Go to a separate computer to
Yeah,
open
it's
up.
in the chat.
Scroll down, maybe.
I don't think you're in the right. Yeah, you're not. That's the technical advisory committee meeting.
Oh.
You're in the wrong meeting, Christine. That's the TAC meeting that you're in. Sorry, just a second.
And I apologize for all that are online. I'm a visual learner myself. It's nice to be able to see the comment.
Hold on, it may have disconnected.
No, everybody on there. Yeah. Well.
Okay, can you guys hear us?
I
Yes,
thought
you
it-
can.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you sound great.
Sorry, we're still getting it fixed. Okay.
We're just gonna give a second here for everyone to process this comment. Those are two separate items.
So can I ask a question?
Go,
I guess of SJ, or,
let's get SJ to get a motion on the floor since we, I guess.
All right, so, okay, I will make the motion again. I move that we make a comment for section 4 to add, and honestly, I'm not sure whether this should be a goal or a performance measure, but support and improve land use and tax base on properties affected by the projects. And then to discuss it, I need a second.
I second.
Okay, Diana seconded. So now we're in discussion.
Christine, you had a question?
It was Diane, it was me. So SJ, I'm having trouble understanding like enhanced land use, like how would you measure that?
So I changed it. I end up with, I said it's important and improve land use. You know, and obviously that doesn't work if, you know, you're talking eminent domain and just taking over a property and clearing it so you can put pavement there. But I mean, I think, I just watching, like I was very involved in the MCR Pell. One of the reasons why the MCR Pell met so much resistance from the community and from the businesses is because, you know, how the project impacted their ability to continue to do business really wasn't a consideration throughout the process. Or for, you know, for homeowners, it was, you know, kind of like quality of life issues for them. So I guess I'm just, you know, thinking in terms of, you know, we've got a project coming through our neighborhood. Those of us who aren't going to lose our properties to the project are interested in seeing conditions on the street improve, access to our businesses improve, you know, kind of the ability to use the land use that has been designated for our areas to be, you know, improved as opposed to hindered by the project. So I guess that's my thinking behind this one.
So I make a comment on the use of tax base. I think that's a perspective based item. As out in CER, a lot of people don't want to have increased taxes versus the multifamily unit owner that's considering selling would be beneficial for his tax basis to go up. So I see conflicting perspectives on tax base. Were you looking at a single side of that tax base?
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at, like, you know, my thinking there was what's an objective measure of, you know, whether something is going to have a negative or positive impact on an area. And if you look at the tax base, if the tax base goes down, yeah, when I say tax base, I mean, basically, you know, properties in an area, you know, that, I mean, it's something you can, you know, that you can look up pretty clearly with, you know, acreage tax assessor's office information. Yeah, I mean, just basically the idea there was that to have an objective metric as to whether, you know, you're having a positive or negative impact on property values.
You just said it. I think you need property values there instead of tax base. I mean, that's showing that you're a growing, thriving community. If your property values are going up, you're in a good place. If they're going down, you're turning into a slum. I mean, in general.
That makes sense. I mean, I'm up for changing. So we would be changing tax base to property values?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
That makes a lot of sense. Do we want to, and Michael, do you want to make this, I mean, would we Matt, would we do this as an amendment to the
So who
motion?
made the motion? So whoever made it and seconded, if they accept the friendly amendment, I'm fine to do it that way. So SJ.
Great, this is
you make
SJ,
the
I accept the amendment. And then Diane, I think you seconded it?
Yeah.
Is that right?
You're okay with it?
Yep,
Okay.
I'm okay with my amendment.
Yeah.
So what is the final?
I'm
supposed to
typing it
be?
up right now.
And then Mike Grayberg had his hand up. Do you have?
Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, here.
Is everybody still there?
Yeah, I think we're just processing.
Okay.
Are there any questions or comments on the rewritten? So it's support and improve land use and property values on properties affected by projects. And so did we define where this was? Was this a goal? Was this a?
Sounds,
I think this would be more of a goal, I guess, reading it.
Or it could be an objective. It'd just probably be good to clarify what we're talking about here when we submit this comment.
Yeah, because we're not doing comments on goals and objectives at this point.
So this is not a goal and objective. This is,
Okay.
We're looking for comments on our performance measures and criteria. And we'll accept it if you submit it as a goal or objective, but we won't be including it as part of our we won't be responding to it as part of our comment response. We'll just
Well,
say.
and I think,
we'll carry this
yeah,
forward
I
until
get,
later.
I'm okay submitting it as a comment on criteria. I mean, property values is a pretty clear metric for measuring success in this. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's fine to submit as a comment there.
This is Bob Franks. I think it works well as a performance measure.
okay, I gotta ask this, guys. How would you measure this? How would you know the impact of the project would have on the property value? I mean, maybe you could say it was positive or negative, but different areas would have a positive or negative effect. And how could you measure the outcome until the project went through?
That's correct. It's a performance measure. That would be looking back.
So this is an assessment of if a project raised or lowered property values.
Gotcha. So it's not a criteria. It's a.
Although, I mean, I beg to differ. I think in the same way that you can model traffic flows, you can model economic impact on an area by a project, it's not, I mean, it's definitely not the same kind of modeling that is, in a typical AMATS model, but I mean, I definitely think it's something that a contractor who's got to put a proposal together can manage.
Any other comments and questions?
I will just say, this is too vague. What does improved land use mean? If you go through our other performance measures, you'll see that we tried to stay away from that kind of language because that's really subjective and no one really knew what that meant. So we tried to be more specific about things like implementing context-sensitive solutions. Is it matching up with the current land use that's shown in the 2040 land use plan? Up at that, what about Eagle River and Chugach that don't have that? And so like when you say improve land use, that's a pretty nebulous thing that I don't know if that really lends benefit to making sure a project is adhering to the land use as described in the 2040 land use plan or other things like that. So that would be my only thing is think about, is there a way to make this a little more specific? The property values, yeah, we'll see. it would be more helpful if you guys could let us know which objective this goes under, if you know of an objective that it falls under. Because as you'll see, all of our performance measures fall in line with an objective. So if you happen to know what that is, I'd love to hear, and then I can work with the consultant on that.
So I guess one thing that you could, instead of land use, like vacancy rates, like improved vacancy rates, some kind of business metric that indicates that, you know,
Lowers vacancy rate, is there?
no, yeah, lowers vacancy rate to show that the business community is thriving in that area. I mean, I think that's some of the thing that SJ is kind of driving at. I mean, that's a metric that's easy to.
Okay, so we need to keep moving on. Are there any, is this motion staying the way it is? Are there any friendly amendments before we move forward?
This is Bob French. I could offer an amendment that it would be, I guess, improving land use in compliance with the local planning documents for the area. Which is also pretty nebulous, but I think it might allow for a little bit more variation between areas.
Yeah,
So-
Bob, this is SJ. I was looking at that idea, but it's also, I mean, 4E under the objectives is to match street design to local land use goals, you know, so, and by applying context sensitive solutions and complete streets policies, which, you know, I mean, it's already an objective in there. I was thinking about how do we come up with a performance measure that shows that we're doing that, because right now it's just sort of like percentage of projects that incorporate complete streets. You know, I mean, I like the idea of vacancy rates. I mean, that's achievable, although that gets kind of away from land use a little bit. I mean, I thought about maybe changing the wording to say support land use and improve property values on properties. But again, that's not really a performance measure supporting land use.
So
I know
the
I'm trying
friendly
to get-
amendment has not been accepted right here. So Bob, are you still moving forward to amend?
I
We'll do
think
a,
it's fine. I could drop it.
okay. So if there's no other, are there any objections? Are there any other comments or questions before we vote on this? Are there any objections to moving SJ's resolution? Hearing none, the comment is approved. Next.
And Matt, just for the record, Bruce Bustamante has joined the meeting.
Excellent. Hey, Bruce.
Hi, sorry I'm late, but glad I could jump in and at least listen to what's going on.
No worries. We're glad you can participate. SJ, did you have any further comments?
No, I think as far as performance measures, that's all I wanted to throw in there.
Okay. Are there any other committee members that wish to bring forth comments right now?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Diane.
3C2. So it says implement the land use plan, and I would kind of expect to see the word and street topology. So I'm just wondering what happened to street topology? Is that still something that the city is working on, or have they dropped that?
Well, it's something that AMATS is working on.
Amen. So
Yeah.
that is an ongoing, or
Yeah, it's just.
is that what you're intended when you say land use plan is street topology? I think we should include the word street topology.
Well, because this one is specifically for the land use. So it was trying to comply with the existing land use plan. Street topology, do we have it somewhere else? Let's see.
Like 2040 or CER comp plan?
Well, the street topology is supposed to match.
Yeah, we don't have
That-
street topology in there, so I guess you can add it if you want. It just, I don't know if that's the right one, but we'll look at it.
Well,
So-
I guess if it's not a, or elsewhere as appropriate.
Are you making a comment?
Yeah, I would like to add a amendment to add, street, the land use plan. And then put in parentheses, street topology. Unless there's a more appropriate place to reference it.
And what comment or what criteria number was that?
3C2. It's a performance measure.
Okay, sorry.
So we need so to clarify that, you want to put in parentheses, street topology behind land use plan?
Yeah,
Okay, do we have a second?
This is Steve Warren, I second.
Okay, so we are under discussion right now. I don't know what street topology is. Could you clarify?
so it's like the streetscape, like to make sure that the streetscape matches the surrounding,
What's streetscape?
how wide the sidewalk is, what the trees look like, is there a median?
Isn't that like the land use plan? What's the difference?
Well, they were supposed to come up with a street topology so that when you had a neighborhood that had a certain feel to it, that new projects would match that. Right, Aaron, am I?
Yeah,
Or
street
funding.
topology is kind of the next step to the land use plan. It's something we're working on anyways. I just had a question. Do you mean land use plan and street topology plan, or are you wanting, because the street topology is not part of the
So
land
it's
use
not
plan.
part of,
They're separate
They're
things.
separate
Okay,
documents.
okay.
Okay, that's what's clarifying. Okay.
and I wasn't, since it's not done yet, I didn't know exactly where it was going.
So
I
you're-
guess it should put and street.
Friendly
topology
amendment
plan.
is accepted.
Well, unless it's, no, I don't have any.
But you're okay with that as a.
Oh,
friendly
yeah, no,
amendment to
I
do
think,
and.
yeah, I'm okay,
Okay.
yeah.
So do we have any questions, comments? Staff, this is online.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I think this is okay. We'll have to look at it, whether it should be here or kind of its own separate
That's
one. We may want to have it as its own separate performance measure because
C3.
we still need to see how the street topology plan works, how to implement it, that kind of stuff. Like the land use plan is done. So we can have that as kind of its own, but we'll talk about it with the consultants and see, but I think I understand what you're getting at, so.
So I have just one comment. As we're rolling out new items, and you were giving the example in criteria that we could be adding new items that we don't have things to measure yet. But my only fear is Anchorage is a priority and maybe the ways to measure things would potentially, what happens if you can only measure some projects, but you can't measure all of them?
That's why we try and have a large variety of performance measures that can cover almost every single project we can do with federal funding.
Gotcha.
Because we have the federal measures, which do allow us to do almost every single project will be covered under in some way, shape, or form. Like, for example, percent of non-single occupancy vehicle, that's a pretty easy one, but annual hours of peak hour excessive delay per capita, you would think that that's solely vehicular focused. But if you also think about it in the ways that non-motorized projects can help with taking people out of their car and helping to reduce that excessive delay. While our model can't measure it right now, we're trying to come up with vision eval, which is like a strategic planning model, basically, that can measure those impacts of non-motorized user benefits to the overall transportation system. So I think we're fine with it.
Do you understand just
There may be some projects like studies are going to be hard for us to measure, but if we find out what those projects are, it gives us the ability to make adjustments. Because, just as a reminder, we update this plan every 4 years.
So street topography, topology, when that information is rolled out, would it be rolled out for CER and Anchorage, or would it just be rolled out for Anchorage?
Yeah, it'll be rolled out for the entire AMATS area.
Okay, perfect.
So that actually helps Eagle River.
Yeah, yeah.
You're trying to make it look like the rest of Eagle River or what you're driving toward.
Well, that's why we may have it as a separate one, because when we say land use plan, we specifically mean the 2040 land use plan for the Anchorage Bowl area. Because well, we'd have to look at that and see, because the problem is, I get Chugaki River does have a land use plan, but
You knew I was just getting into right now, because I thought when you
Yeah.
used the word land use plan, you were referencing whatever the prevailing land use plan is, which ours is.
we have to make it that to, what we'd have to do is put clarification there, what we're talking about, and it would account for both of them.
So we have one, the motion that's on the floor right now. Do we have any other questions, comments? Are there any objections to approving Diana's motion or comments? Hearing none, the comments are approved. Before you go on, do you mind if I pass the gavel and I'd like to make a quick comment right here?
Sure.
Are you okay with that? Is John on?
John, are you still on? John Scudder? Might be off yet. He could only stay. for
Or he might have.
If I make a motion, do I have to pass the gavel? If I make a comment?
If you make a motion, I think you are supposed to.
Steve, can I pass the gavel to you? Okay, your chair.
What does that mean?
Meet your chair right now.
Okay,
I can't make a comment.
okay, got it.
So I just like to make a comment right here of where it uses land use plan. This is really important in my community, so I just like to have some way to capture this is where the words land use plan is used. We don't have CERs not included in the 2040 land use plan. So I would just like to make a general comment that alternative criteria would always be given whenever land use plan is used for a scoring purpose. So that our our current land use plan could be evaluated.
Or
Matt,
have
are you
a
making
note.
Is that a motion or just a comment that you're making?
I'm making a motion as a general comment.
All right, this is SJ. I'll second that.
Oh, yeah, so it's been seconded and the comment, the motion goes forth.
Discussion.
And then it's just, yeah,
Open for discussion, yeah.
I just don't want CER to be penalized because of not being included in Anchorage's 2040 land use plan.
and there's, I mean, I thought, I was under the impression that there was a land use plan map or land use plan for Chugaki Eagle River, but it hasn't been approved yet. Is that what the situation is?
The Anchorage 2040, that's what Aaron made the comment that when the words land use plan are referenced, go ahead.
That may not actually be true. So what I wanted to ask you
Okay.
is, can you amend your motion? I can't ask for this.
Yes. Yep.
To say, or define what we mean by land use plan.
Whatever. Before I pass it.
Because what I want to note is that, you know, I probably misspoke when I said that it only included the 2040, because the problem is it's capitalized land use plan. And that's how they normally reference the 2040 land use plan. But when we looked at these, we were trying to incorporate and include Chugaki Eagle River because we heard about this a lot during the TIP criteria and everything like that. And we don't want to completely exclude a portion of our area. So I think what I need to do is work with the consultants to define what we mean by land use plan there. If it's just the 2040 land use plan or if it's everything for the appropriate area.
Yeah, I would accept that friendly amendment.
Okay, so.
Yeah, this is SJ. I'll accept it as second.
Okay, it's been seconded and discussion's over. So I'll pass the gavel back to Matt.
No, you say, are there any objections?
Oh, are there any objections?
It's easy way to do it. Unanimous consent.
Hearing no objections, the motion goes forward. And now are you done, Matt?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I'm gonna pass the gavel back to Matt because he knows what he's doing.
Thank you, Diana, for humoring me right there.
No, no problem.
Go ahead.
I know how it is.
That's a real
You're
big one.
the stepchild.
Yeah.
Oh, so,
You had more comments, I was assuming?
so are we doing, everything so far was PMs, right? Are we gonna move over to the criteria or is it?
You have the
all mixed
floor.
up?
You have the floor. If you would,
Okay.
it'd be nice if you,
All my PMs are done,
okay,
but
yeah, if you would move over to criteria, you have the floor right now.
So on criteria block, goal 1, first improves existing surface transportation infrastructure condition. It only mentions surface condition and the PMs have bridges. And they also mention interstate versus non-interstate, highways. So I think that at least bridges should be included. Project improves the surface condition of the existing roads, bridges, and non-motorized infrastructure. For the 10-point.
And
I mean, I didn't know why bridges weren't.
because we as AMATs don't do bridges,
Oh, okay.
but because this plan does,
Because you have performance measures that are bridges.
well, that's because the feds require those. So, but yeah, this is,
Or-
yeah, we can look
well,
at that.
Well, just explain then why. It didn't make sense to me. And I have another, I guess, question for AMATs that could be turned into a comment, I guess. For the criteria, at the stage that these projects are in, they would not have anything more than a couple line scope or a paragraph scope, as far as I know. So I don't understand how these really detailed criteria could be applied to a project when, you know, they don't have a preliminary design or any information available. Am I missing something?
I mean, these criteria aren't really that detailed. That was the whole point. Because,
Well, you have there would be a lot of,
So
I mean, how do you know?
what was your original comment? Just before we get too caught in here, if you wanted to add roads and bridges.
Oh, I'm sorry. So, yeah, we didn't go through the whole.
No, I was
detail.
thought you were tying it together right
No.
there. So I'm just bringing it back to the
Yeah.
roads. So what is your specific comment?
Add, existing roads, comma, bridges, and non-motorized infrastructure.
Can we get a second? Under what? Bicycles, pedestrians?
Complete street major infrastructure.
Okay.
And that's because the performance measures mention bridges.
I mean, yeah, okay.
Can we get a second?
I guess it's, yeah.
Bob French, I'll go ahead and second.
Comments? Are there any objections to approving this comment? Hearing none, the comment's approved.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Back to my next one. So I'm used to MTP projects not having a lot of definition behind them. And so I'm just wondering how the scoring criteria is going to work. Like, you may not know if there's going to be sidewalks or, you know, what the scope of the project is, or how it's going to improve emergency response time or ADA accessibility. I mean, any of the categories, there's a lot of specific things that they're mentioning within the criteria, and your projects, for the MTP, the project definition isn't gonna have much information.
Are you making a question or a comment? What is specifically your question or comment?
The comment would be that, how is the MTP process going to accommodate, scoring under the criteria when there isn't a lot of project definition at that stage?
Okay, can we get a second?
Well, French, I'll go ahead and second again.
And just a reminder is, just because you seconded it, obviously we can have seconded just for the purpose of discussion right here. We're not approving it just by making a second. Okay, so we are open to questions, comments.
And I guess the main purpose of this comment would be for AMATs to elaborate on in their comment response, how that's gonna happen.
This is Steve Horn. I think it's a good question, but I don't know how it's specific to changing or modifying the criteria. That's an thing. I don't have this. What?
Oh, I was just gonna add on when you're,
Oh, yeah. So I don't mind carrying the question forward, though.
I don't mind carrying the question forward, but I do have, the MTP is 20+ years. I just have a hard time to see how we could have design phase with these projects, just with the structure of MTP.
Well, it might be that it lends itself, there might be more scope definition that carries along to the MTP project's proposal. So that when you go back 10 years from now and someone questions, well, I thought we were going to have improved safety for pedestrians, but they took the sidewalk out or they didn't even have one. I mean, that's kind of what I've seen happen. We don't have enough money. You know, and they start cutting scope.
Mhm.
Scope is cut and so.
Questions, comments? Any objection to approving Diana's comment? Hearing none, the comment is approved.
I think that's it.
Do we have any other CAC members that wish to bring forth comments?
Are we in the TAC now?
Do you guys have a tax schedule right now?
Sorry, I don't understand the question.
I don't either. I was really confused. Who, can you,
Bob?
was that you, Bob French?
It was. I thought I heard TAC instead of CAC.
I thought I said CAC. Okay. Maybe that gotcha. Threw me a curveball. I thought we had another meeting going here. That's like it. Do we have any other comments by any CAC members? Hearing none, we'll go off of new business. I'm not stirring an agenda. That was our only item. So hearing no other business, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Steve Horn, I put forward a motion to adjourn the meeting.
We're adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Yeah, it's all good.